The Atacama is a canvas of cosmic indifference. It is here I came to die, or perhaps to live, endless, star-strewn. You can get lost in the vastness out here, lose more than just your way. You can lose your mind. I would know. This place, this metal husk of an observatory, has become my sanctuary, my prison, and my crucible. The dry air, thin and crisp enough to crack, carries sound in a way that can drive a man to the edge. Every creak of the telescope's gears, every shift of the sand, sets my teeth on edge, like the squealing of a rusted metal sign. Amidst the star-laced expanse, the vastness of the cosmos deafens with its unyielding silence. You could scream until your lungs gave out, and no one would hear you. My name is Jasper Turner, a has-been, a cautionary tale whispered in the halls of academia. Turner, they say, the man who saw patterns where there were none. Turner, the man who chased phantoms and lost his grip. My theories on non-random anomalies in the cosmic microwave background radiation were, to put it mildly, not well received. Highly speculative, they'd said, their voices tight with condescension, barely suppressed snickers and contemptuous glares. The snickers hurt the most. They are harder to fight against than the words. But I knew I was onto something. I could feel it in my gut. But that's not science, they would say. They made sure I paid a hefty price for that feeling. It wasn't an instant downfall, not a dramatic crash, more like a slow, agonizing bleed-out. Research grants denied, invitations to conferences rescinded, and colleagues, once eager to collaborate, now avoided eye contact. They would pretend not to see me when I approached. Then, they would look through me as if I were not there at all. My name, once uttered with a hint of respect, became synonymous with delusion. And so, I retreated, like a wounded animal, to this desolate corner of the world, to the Altiplano High-Altitude Observatory. Paul, bless his heart, threw me a lifeline. Dr. Paul Mitchell, my old mentor, the only one who didn't dismiss me entirely. He runs this place. He couldn't get me back into the inner circle, not after the spectacle I'd made of myself, but he offered me a chance to continue my research, away from the scorn, the pity, and the judgment. He provided me a safe space, away from the prying eyes, where I could continue to follow my delusions. Of course, Paul had conditions. I had to contribute to the observatory's primary research, mapping near-Earth asteroids, cataloguing cometary activity, standard stuff, boring stuff. My work, my real work, had to be done on my own time, in the stolen hours between scheduled observations, where I would analyze the data the way I wanted to, my way. It was a compromise, a demotion, but it was something. And to Paul's eternal credit, he did get me decent equipment. A state-of-the-art radio telescope array, a spectrograph that could dissect starlight with surgical precision, and a suite of custom-built software for signal analysis. It wasn't the cutting-edge playground of, say, CERN or Keck, but it was more than I deserved, more than I had a right to expect after my spectacular fall from grace. The world outside these walls has moved on, of course. It always does. Climate change is biting hard now. The news channels, when I bother to tune in, are full of extreme weather events, coastal cities bracing for rising sea levels, and mass migrations inland. Resources are dwindling, and nations are turning inward, the spirit of cooperation fading like an old photograph left out in the sun. Space exploration, once a symbol of unity, of shared ambition, has become a luxury, a distraction. Funding is drying up, diverted to more immediate concerns. Ironically, it makes my exile easier to bear. If the world is looking down, consumed by its own problems, it's less likely to notice one disgraced astronomer pursuing his fantasies in the desert. But it also means that Paul's patience will soon run out. Tonight, however, the world feels 1,000,000 miles away. Tonight, the universe is my only companion. The telescope is tracking a patch of sky in the constellation Fornax, a region I've been monitoring for months. It's a long shot, A fishing expedition based on my discredited theories. But I can't shake the feeling that there is something unusual about the energy fluctuations emanating from that region of space. A series of pulses. It's not the random noise of cosmic background radiation. This is structured, organized. My heart, that old, tired muscle, leaps in my chest. This is it. It has to be. After years of chasing ghosts, could I have finally stumbled upon something real? I run a preliminary analysis, filtering out known sources of interference, terrestrial and otherwise. The signal remains. A rhythmic pulse, a complex sequence of spikes and troughs. My hands start to tremble, and I make a fist, trying to steady myself. I'm tapping my foot without realizing it. I note the anomaly, its coordinates, the date, the time. I initiate a longer, more detailed scan of the region, instructing the telescope to gather as much data as possible. The hours crawl by, each tick of the clock an eternity. My focus remains fixed on the monitor, where the raw data is being translated into a visual representation. The patterns are complex, like a language I don't yet understand. But there is a symmetry to them, a cadence that feels oddly familiar. I begin tapping my fingers on the edge of the console, unconsciously mimicking the rhythm of the signal. It's as if some primal part of my brain recognizes the pattern on a level I can't articulate. Then, a shiver, a cold spike of awareness runs down my spine. It's not a conscious act. My body is moving on its own. The tapping in my foot has intensified, and I can feel the vibration through the floor. A tremor maybe, but one that seems to be localized just to my area of the room. It's almost as if the signal is affecting me. I should record this, document the physical effect. But another, more urgent thought pushes its way to the forefront. Paul. He needs to see this. He's the only one who might believe me, the only one who can help me make sense of this. I draft an email, trying to maintain a professional tone, to sound rational and composed, despite the tremor in my hands and the erratic thumping of my heart. I describe the signal, its unusual characteristics, the way it seems to resonate, not just in the data, but within my own body. I attach a preliminary data file, a small sample of the signal, just enough to pique his interest. Paul, I type, I think I've found something real. You need to take a look at this, an actual signal. Also, and you're going to think I've finally lost it, I seem to be reacting to the signal in a strange way. It's making me tap my foot uncontrollably. My fingers too. It's like my body is trying to match the rhythm. Anyway, get back to me when you can. This could be it. This could be what I've been looking for all these years. We were right. They were wrong. I lean back, close my eyes, and let the image of the signal replay in my mind. It's almost as if I can hear it, like a distant drumbeat. And the thought surfaces unbidden, like laughter. It starts out slow, almost hesitant, but then builds, becoming more complex, more insistent. It's a sound that seems to burrow into my very being, making my skin crawl, yet, at the same time, drawing me in, beckoning me closer. Days later, there's no reply from Paul. This is unusual. He's always prompt, even if it's to tell me I'm chasing shadows. I send a follow-up, then another, each one increasingly urgent. My concern deepens when I receive an automated message informing me that Dr. Mitchell is currently unavailable and will be out of the office for an unspecified period. I reach out to a few of our mutual contacts, trying to ascertain his whereabouts. The responses, when they come, are vague, unhelpful. Haven't seen him, they say. Last I heard, he was dealing with some urgent matter. Try reaching him at the administrative office. I try, but the administrative office line is perpetually busy and my emails go unanswered. It's as if Paul has vanished. The lack of contact, the sudden silence, fuels my growing obsession with the signal. I spend every waking moment analyzing the data, trying to decipher its secrets. The signal is complex, multi-layered, a collection of intricate patterns. I isolate sequences, run them through various algorithms, trying to find a key, a Rosetta Stone that will unlock its meaning. And the laughter. It's always there, lurking beneath the surface, a constant rhythmic presence that fills my waking hours and invades my dreams. I find myself drawn to it, addicted to it, in a way that both terrifies and exhilarates me. It's becoming harder and harder to focus, to think straight. My body is always active, tapping, twitching, a rush of nervous energy that I can't control. One evening, while running a spectral analysis of a particularly dense section of the signal, I make a breakthrough. I manage to isolate a sequence, a repeating motif that seems to form the basis of the signal's structure. I convert it into an audio file, and as the sound fills the room, I realize, with a jolt of both horror and morbid fascination, that it is, unmistakably, laughter. Not just random noise that my brain is interpreting as laughter, but structured, rhythmic, almost musical laughter. It's a sound that chills me to the bone, yet at the same time, I find myself leaning in, craving more, my body swaying in time with the rhythm. Paul's absence becomes a gaping void, a constant source of worry. My rational mind tells me there must be a logical explanation. Perhaps he's on a trip, a conference, an emergency. But another part of me, the part that's increasingly attuned to the signal, insists that something is wrong, that his disappearance and the signal are connected. I try to push these thoughts aside, to focus on the work, on the signal. But the laughter is everywhere now, in the noise of the equipment, in the creak of the building, in the desert wind. It's in my head, a constant companion, a siren song that I can't resist. And as I examine the signal more closely, as I strip away its layers, I begin to understand that it's not just a message, it's a warning encoded in the fabric of laughter, a sound designed to bypass our rational defenses, to penetrate to the core of our being. And the message, as it slowly reveals itself, is one of impending doom, of an entity that communicates through frequencies that are lethal to every living thing in the universe. An entity that is on its way here, to our small, fragile, blue planet, and whose laughter will be our last lullaby. The laughter haunted me, a constant companion, a phantom echo in the silence of the observatory. My reflection was a stranger, thin and sunken-eyed, a figure who was starting to frighten me. My waking hours were consumed by the signal, by the maddening rhythmic laughter that came from the speakers, from the universe, from within my very bones. I was unraveling, my sanity fraying like a worn cable on the verge of snapping. The patterns consumed my thoughts, intricate and hypnotic, a labyrinth of sound from which there was no escape. My reality had become the signal. Paul's absence troubled me. Still no word, no contact. He always said I was too solitary, too independent for my own good. Yet when I needed him most, he was gone. It was as if he had never existed. Had I imagined him? Was any of this real? My rational mind insisted there must be a logical explanation, but the signal whispered a different story, a tale of conspiracy and hidden truths, a story where Paul perhaps had stumbled upon something he shouldn't have, something related to the signal, and had been silenced. I dismissed it, of course. It sounded like paranoia, like the ravings of a madman. But wasn't that what I was becoming? Driven by a potent cocktail of scientific fervor, paranoia, and a growing, inexplicable attachment to the signal itself, I began to decode it in earnest. I developed new algorithms, new analytical techniques, pushing the observatory's computational resources to their limits, ignoring the alarms that flashed on the screen, warning of overheating, system overload. I pushed myself as well, forgoing food and rest, fueled by a manic energy that seemed to emanate from the signal itself. I hardly noticed as my body began to break down. I had more important things to worry about. The breakthrough came not in a sudden flash of insight, but in a gradual, almost grudging surrender of the signal's secrets. The recurring motifs, the rhythmic patterns, began to align themselves, like tumblers in a lock, revealing a structure, a syntax, a language. But it was a language unlike any I had ever encountered. It was as if the signal was speaking directly to my subconscious, bypassing the rational, analytical parts of my brain, which was driving me mad, although I did not care anymore. I theorized that the laughter was a kind of psycholinguistic Trojan horse, a way to convey information too disturbing, too alien for direct comprehension, information that would shatter the human psyche if perceived unfiltered. Days turned into nights, marked only by the changing shifts of the stars across the vast desert sky. The signal's influence over me intensified. I craved the sound, the laughter, needed it like a drug, like the very air I breathed. My body, once a vessel for intellect, was now an instrument, resonating with the signal's frequencies. The tremors, the involuntary tapping, had become constant, a rhythmic dance of my limbs that I no longer controlled, nor cared to. My physical and mental deterioration accelerated. Insomnia, once an occasional visitor, became a permanent resident, my mind a ceaseless whirl of patterns and equations. Auditory hallucinations plagued me, the laughter morphing into voices, fragments of conversation, snatches of Paul's voice, distorted and unintelligible, adding fuel to my growing paranoia and fear. I had to warn others to make them understand the impending danger. It was my duty. This was my purpose, although I was beginning to forget why. I contacted other observatories, other scientists, those who had once been my peers. I sent them my findings, my decoded fragments of the message, my urgent pleas for them to listen, to heed the warning. The responses, when they came, were a gut punch. Some dismissed me outright, their replies echoing the scorn, the ridicule of my past. "Turner's lost it," they said. "He's seeing patterns again, hearing things. It's a breakdown, a delusion." Others were more cautious, intrigued but skeptical. They couldn't replicate my findings, they said. Their data didn't show the same patterns, the same signal. Or, if it did, they interpreted it differently, attributing it to some mundane terrestrial phenomenon, a glitch in the equipment, a new form of cosmic radiation. The world refused to see what was right in front of them. My isolation deepened. The only solace I found was in the signal itself. It was a vicious cycle, a feedback loop of dependence and despair. The more I listened, the more I understood, and the more I understood, the more I needed to listen. The laughter that had once chilled me to the bone now brought a strange, twisted sense of comfort, of belonging. It was a connection, a communion, with something vast, ancient, and utterly alien. It was destroying me, body and mind, yet I couldn't bring myself to turn it off, to silence the sound that had become my only companion in this desolate corner of the world. It was the only thing that mattered anymore. Then came the day Paul finally reappeared, not through email or phone, but in person, materializing like a spectre in the observatory doorway. Relief, stark and blinding, washed over me, followed by a surge of anger. Where had he been? Why hadn't he answered my messages? He looked terrible, pale and drawn, his arm in a sling, his movements stiff and pained, as if he'd been injured, although I could not see how. Before I could voice my questions, my accusations, he spoke, his voice urgent, laced with a fear that mirrored my own, but also laced with something else, contempt perhaps. "Jasper, you need to stop this," he said, his eyes locked on the monitors, on the swirling patterns of the signal. "You need to shut it down now before it's too late." I stared at him, uncomprehending. Shut it down? This was my purpose. This was my destiny. This is what I was meant to do. It was the only thing I had left. How could he ask me to do this? It was the only thing keeping me going. "You don't understand," I stammered, the words clumsy, inadequate. "It's a warning, Paul, an entity, it's coming, the laughter, it's killing you, Jasper." He cut me off, his voice sharp, insistent. "It's changing you. Look at yourself. You're a wreck, a shadow. This isn't science, Jasper. It's madness." His words, his presence were an intrusion, a violation of the sacred space I had created, the bond I had forged with the signal. I saw him then not as a friend, a mentor, but as a threat, an agent of the forces trying to silence me, to bury the truth. My paranoia, simmering beneath the surface for so long, erupted. My hands balled into fists, and the tapping in my foot increased to a violent tremor. "You're one of them," I accused, my voice trembling with rage, with a terrifying certainty. "You're trying to stop me, to keep the truth hidden. You always were jealous. You couldn't stand that I was the one who found it, not you, me. You want it for yourself." The confrontation escalated, a whirlwind of accusations, pleas, and denials. Paul tried to reason with me, to break through the wall of delusion and obsession that separated us. But his words were like pebbles against a dam, futile gestures against the torrent of the signal's influence. I was too far gone, lost in a world of patterns and frequencies, of laughter and impending doom. I no longer wanted to share my discovery. In the end, it came to a physical struggle, a clumsy, desperate brawl amidst the blinking lights of the observatory. Paul, weakened by his injuries, was no match for me. The signal had changed me, granting me a strength, a ferocity I never knew I possessed. He was surprisingly weak. I overpowered him, a surge of adrenaline, of something darker, coursing through my veins. I saw the fear in his eyes, the realization of the horror I had become, and it only fueled my rage. I bound him, my former friend, my mentor, with cables from the very equipment he had provided me, gagging him with duct tape to silence his pleas, his warnings. I had to continue my work. With Paul subdued, I returned to the signal, to the laughter, my focus absolute, unwavering. The world outside, the world of human concerns, of fear and doubt, faded into insignificance. There was only the signal, the entity, and the task that lay before me. Reports began to trickle in from news channels, fragmented and confused, of strange occurrences around the globe. Mass hysterias, unexplained deaths, riots in major cities. Other observatories confirmed the presence of a similar signal, though their interpretations differed wildly, a jumble of conflicting theories and panicked speculation. The world was finally catching on, but it was too late. The entity was approaching, its arrival heralded by a growing intensity in the signal, a terrifying crescendo of laughter that resonated across the planet, sowing chaos and despair. But I felt nothing. I had moved beyond such petty concerns. My work took on a new urgency, a new direction. I began to build, cobbling together a device from spare parts, from salvaged equipment, guided by an intuition, a knowledge that seemed to flow directly from the signal itself. It was a haphazard creation, a tangle of wires, circuits, and repurposed components. But to me, it was a masterpiece, a key, a bridge. I understood now, with a clarity that bordered on divine revelation, that my task was not merely to decode the signal, but to respond, to communicate, to make contact with the entity. The device, I realized, was not a weapon or a shield, but a translator, a conduit. It would allow me to synchronize my own bioelectric field with the entity's frequencies, to become one with the signal, to transcend the limitations of my physical form, and, perhaps, to merge with the entity itself. The entity's arrival was not heralded by trumpets or fanfare, but by a shift in the fabric of reality. The signal intensified, the laughter growing louder, a chorus that resonated not just in the air, but in the very core of my being. The world outside the observatory was descending into chaos. The news, when I bothered to check, spoke of widespread panic, societal collapse, and unexplained phenomena that defied scientific explanation. Governments crumbled, and the thin veneer of civilization evaporated like morning dew. None of it mattered. Not anymore. My focus was absolute, laser-sharp, on the device, my creation. It was ready. I climbed to the observatory's roof, the device strapped to my chest, a tangle of wires and electrodes connecting it to my body. The cold desert air, once a source of discomfort, now felt strangely invigorating. The tremors that had plagued me for weeks were gone, replaced by a sense of profound stillness, of perfect equilibrium. Above, the sky roiled, Not with clouds, but with iridescent patterns of light, like an aurora borealis on a cosmic scale. It was beautiful, terrifying, and utterly alien. These were not mere atmospheric disturbances. They were the visible manifestations of the entity's presence, the footprints of a god, or perhaps a devil, walking across the heavens. I understood. Finally, I understood. This was not an ending, but a beginning. A transcendence. Paul, trussed up like a sacrificial offering in the control room below, remained a loose end, a vestige of my former life, a life I no longer recognized or cared for. He was beyond my help, beyond anyone's help, his fate insignificant in the grand cosmic drama that was unfolding. His muffled struggles and muffled pleas, once a source of annoyance, had faded into background noise, like the chirping of crickets on a summer night. I pitied him, in a detached, abstract sort of way, but pity was an emotion I could no longer afford. My destiny lay elsewhere, beyond the confines of human comprehension, beyond the limitations of this fragile, dying world. His muffled sounds soon stopped altogether. As the celestial patterns intensified, coalescing into a blinding vortex of light directly above the observatory, I activated the device. A surge of energy coursed through my body, not painful, but transformative, like being immersed in liquid light. My senses expanded, my consciousness reaching out, merging with the signal, with the laughter, with the entity itself. It was an embrace, a communion, a merging of consciousness that transcended all known laws of physics and biology. The physical world, the observatory, the earth, everything, began to dissolve, to become one with the all-consuming, all-encompassing laughter. My physical body began to disintegrate, but I felt no pain, only a sense of liberation, of release. From the perspective of any surviving observer, it might have appeared as a catastrophic explosion, a blinding flash of energy erupting from the observatory, followed by a shockwave that rippled across the desert, leveling everything in its path. But from within the singularity, from within the heart of the laughter, there was no destruction, only transformation. I was becoming something else, something more, a part of the entity, a ripple in the cosmic fabric, a note in the celestial symphony. Was this death? Or was it something else entirely, something beyond human comprehension? It didn't matter. All that mattered was the laughter, the eternal, all-consuming laughter, which had become my own. The last thing I saw before my body dissolved was a familiar face. Paul. He had freed himself somehow, but it was too late. He stood in the doorway, his eyes wide with horror, his mouth open in a silent scream. Then, he too was consumed by the light, his body breaking down just as mine had. This was not the end. This was only the beginning. The aftermath was a silence more profound than any I had ever known. The entity, having touched our world, moved on, leaving behind a planet scarred, transformed, but not entirely obliterated. Pockets of humanity survived, huddled in the ruins, forever changed by the encounter. They told stories of the event, of the strange lights in the sky, of the laughter that had driven men mad, of the astronomer who had sought to commune with the unknown and, in doing so, had unleashed a cosmic force. It became a legend, a myth, a cautionary tale spoken around campfires under the vast, indifferent stars. A tale of a man consumed by his own curiosity and the laughter of the gods. A tale of the end, and perhaps a new, terrifying beginning. The world was forever changed, the survivors forever marked, by the echoes of the void, by the laughter's embrace. They would never forget. They would spend the rest of their days wondering what had happened. They would create stories, religions even. The world would never be the same, but it had survived, forever haunted by what had come before, forever haunted by the laughter.